Well, welcome to our podcast today. We have a great guest, and we can't, really can't wait to get it started. But today, Donna Bruno is joining us, and the title of our podcast today is "Learning to Stand in Your Own Truth." Donna has a story that's, like many of us, goes from dark to light and continual growth and all of that. But she's also a nurse practitioner, board certified. She also has her own business, which she's a medical director of. And so you can find her at DB Rejuvenation NY for New York.com. And so I'm going to encourage you, and we'll redo this at the end, to take a look at what she does and what she's made of her life, basically, through her story. So, Donna, I want to welcome you today. And
Thank
she's
you.
also a dear friend of mine. And
Yes.
so we met, just so that you know a little background, we met over 3 years ago. We've both been on spiritual journeys. We've both been on our own healing paths, different things, but connected right away. And
Mhm.
so we've maintained that relationship. And I'm going to tell you, if I ever needed anything professionally done with the expertise that Donna has, I'd be in New York to get it done. So just letting you know that. And, but I'm really thrilled to have her here today. And so I'm going to hand it over to Lenny and to Donna.
Hey, Linda, Donna, nice
Hi,
to
nice
meet
to
you
meet
as
you.
well. Pleasure. Thank you again for coming on the show.
Oh,
Much
sure.
appreciated on Sunday afternoon. Um, and it's another great guest that Linda you put together, so thank you. But honestly, I just want to get into your message and reading through some of the stuff you had sent over to Linda. What caught my attention, and we spoke about it just briefly on the show, was you were speaking of generational trauma.
Mm,
And I was speaking to actually my father, who's a physician,
mhm.
about this some time ago when I was going through my own problems with divorce, children, etc. And his words to me were,
Sorry, my dog. He
"Is no,
wants
he's
to be part
fine.
of this
He's awesome. Mine's usually here, but I don't see him."
here, when it comes to intelligence. And then you start to believe that. I remember back in the day, I'm 58, they would just leave you back, hoping you catch up, not knowing that wasn't going to do anything, right? Because you have the same, your brain still works in a certain way. And catching up, there is no catching up. And you start to see yourself as less. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like that started to become a theme. I'm not as smart. I'm not athletic. Like there was all these labels, and on top of the sexual abuse, that felt like I'm not enough. There was no one protecting me. There was, if it's fair or unfair to say, that's what was happening. And I think from there, at a very young age, bullying was very easily done for me because I felt I was undeserved, and then speaking up became a tool. Not speaking up, becoming small, becoming a people pleaser. That was a tool that I learned early on. I remember I was in grade school and I gave away gum, and for a moment, children were nice to me. And then I saw very quickly, oh, if I give things away, then maybe I can make a friend. And I had a moment of bliss. And that went on until I would say around 12. And then I made a really good friend in middle school. And then she and her, made other friends, and then I took off. But, by then, it was, 1 to 12, boy, a lot going on.
Yes, a lot.
So,
Yeah.
and not getting the right support because your parents also don't really understand. They don't have the tools, especially my mom, who had so much trauma. I was really surprised. My father and mother were both charismatic Catholic, and I said to my father, I said, did mom ever talk about her sexual abuse and get a healing? And he said, no, she never brought it up. And I
Mm-hmm.
was floored. I'm
Yeah.
like, how do you not bring that? I mean, you're in a setting where that's what it's all about. And they were the leaders of that group for a number of years, but that's how deep that trauma was.
Yeah.
And so it comes out in small ways, like your parents are trying to protect you. So my mom would pretty much be like, oh, you're doing good for you. And she truly loved me. It wasn't even like she it was any type of mental abuse. I think she was always trying to keep me from getting hurt. I think she saw how much pain I was growing up. And back then, you didn't go to therapy. You did, you kind of swung from the rafters and hope for the best. And then here I am at 58, and you think of how did I get here? A lot of work. Yeah, a lot of work. And still that onion has got more
Still
layers.
working. Still working.
Yeah, still working. I don't think it ever ends. And that's
I
okay.
agree. That's fine. Wow. Well, that's what it comes down to. And I think at some point, you also mentioned you have to be able to talk about it and block it and cut it off. I feel like I was that person somewhat going through some of the issues. I'm going to say trauma really for me, but others around me that we can't continue this generational trauma to go to the next generation because the cycle just repeats itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you have to fall on that sword, or as they say, take the slings and arrows to maybe stop this from happening to the next generation. However, that may look to anybody else who's dealing with this. But you also mentioned about your parents. Even my generation, they just didn't talk about stuff that was real with you, and if
No.
you were feeling a certain way and like, oh, you'll be fine tomorrow. And in most cases you were, but maybe if we had more of an open dialogue that I feel like younger generations do now, more able to speak about some of these topics of abuse and mental issues, etc., then I think maybe our generation would probably be better off in that when it takes so long to get through some of it, to work through some of it. That's my belief because I came from the same family, Catholic. My dad was Italian and
Mm-hmm.
mom wasn't, and they just not brush on the rug, but it was just always like, oh, just you'll be fine. Just they didn't have the tools to how to talk about it, right? Because they came from
No.
even older generations, so it's
Oh,
not.
yeah.
It's not their fault either. They
No.
just they didn't have the tools capable to even discuss these types of topics with my siblings,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always made a goal to be able to at least be open with my children and others that are willing to open up to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always easy, but I know what you're talking about because I come from the same school, if you will. I think
Well,
Linda does too.
Well,
I know Linda does.
oh, absolutely. And
yeah.
then, you add alcohol on top of that, come
Mm-hmm.
from an Irish family and both sides. And yes, it's really it's ingrained, and a lot of times you don't talk about anything,
Mm-hmm.
because who are you going to talk about to? And I remember my mother, telling me I was like 16 years old and she goes, my mother never loved me,
Mm-hmm.
because my grandmother had died that day. And then I thought, I kind of feel the same way that my mom doesn't love me.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, I lost a home in a tornado. Just lots of different things that had happened in my life. And she would run. She would go
Mm.
to the lake. They had a lake home. So she would leave, you know, and then my dad and his friends would kind of step in. And so there was just no facing, not knowing how. But then I look at my mother, she was, kept in dark rooms,
Mm.
because she had these what we call blind spells, and they would come in from this way, and she would be kept in dark rooms. I mean, because
Mm.
just nobody knew how to handle things. And I kept thinking if she would have been handled differently, then her whole emotional structure would have been different.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Big
her
time.
relationship with me or whomever.
I
So
think that's part of the problem. I think when you're growing up, like I was mentioned before, you're just kind of, even if your childhood was with the basic needs are met, it's not your parents' fault. It's really generational, like we said about the trauma. And so when we start to, I find if you start to blame, well, my mother, my father, my grandmother, whatever, was different. But the thing is that we come into this earth we came up with a group that I meet with about suffering. And someone asked, her son has an ailment. She goes, why would he come to the earth with suffering? And I said, well, with this suffering, not that I would wish anyone suffering, but with this suffering comes growth. And what you do with it is your opportunity when you're able to, I believe in reincarnation. So your opportunity to grow from it. So I feel that for myself, when I detach the idea that someone else has created my world. Yes, because as a child, you don't have choices, right? You're told how to be or who you are. But then there's, if you are lucky enough, uh, if your basic needs are met, like you have a house and everything like that, you can have the gift of trying to have awareness. And in order to have awareness, is you have to figure out what makes my brain click that way. Why do I believe that? Why would I think I'm not smart? Why would I believe I'm not anything anyone has ever told me I wasn't, or not as good, or whatever? And I think it's because you're carrying all that trauma and you actually believe it. You actually believe what someone has told you who you are. And by a certain age, by the time you're 30, unless you actually take the opportunity, it's almost game over. People, if I told,
True.
the fastest runner and they were always told they're not as fast, that person, I believe, would still think they were not as fast. Even if there was words all over the wall, if that person believes it, it's hard to break. It's almost like you're in a trance or like a zombie. It's like you're kind of changing your whole belief system of who you think you truly are. And because that was placed a long time ago. And to reinvent yourself is one, taking the time, like I said, to have the observation of your thoughts. I think I started with Eckhart Tolle years ago, and I
Mhm.
really connected with your thoughts. It was a little hard to me to think of myself in like a third person type of thing, but I did notice that your thoughts do make who you are. So if you want to break the trauma, I think is breaking the thoughts, so catching them. So it's not so easy. It's not like, oh, all of a sudden I think I'm amazing. It doesn't work that way. I think you're
For
right. I
sure.
wish it was that easy, right? But if you
Yep.
take the time with a really strong thought, like whatever really triggers you, take a pause, count backwards from 5, and then ask yourself, is this true? Is it true what they just said to me, or is that placed on me from generations and I actually started to believe this character that was created for me from birth?
Hmm.
Well, and then, that goes into self-fulfilling prophecy, when we talk to ourselves all the time and we begin to believe it. And we can't change anything that we don't acknowledge. So I know I have to, even to this day, all the work that I've done, I have to say, I'm not listening to that.
Mm-hmm,
I have to just stop a minute and say, stop, because I'm so left brain.
mm-hmm,
I have that great creative side because I can feel spirit, I can feel downloads, I get the songs were downloads, all of that. But then
mm-hmm,
I've got this really strong, as an educator, left brain, and it
mm-hmm,
just will not stop.
mm-hmm,
And I'm the age that I am. So, and I think you're correct. It's a daily minute to minute
mm-hmm,
awareness.
mm-hmm. Especially if it stops you from being like what you truly want to be. Um, and if it, I don't know, enlightenment would give you happiness, but it would give you calmness, and you would have the opportunity to learn what your journey is all about. And being on this journey doesn't necessarily mean you have to have the Nobel Prize. You don't have to heal a bunch of people. I feel a lot of times my gift is just holding space. Just try to hold space for myself and hold space for others. I mean, listen, I do well with it and then I fail from it. I'm a human. Someone cuts me off or something like that, or someone's really rude. You're sort of like, what the hell? But at the end of the day, if you take yourself out of the illusion that there's this one way, I guess my message is that, like, I think with being in a spiritual world, we think like if I do this, then I'll be in bliss, and all will fall into place. And then so I think a lot of people on the path will are always grabbing or reaching for that brass ring, and then things will be wonderful. But I don't think it works that way. I think it's a slow process of unraveling all the things that were told to you as a child, and then you truly seeing who you truly are, and then go from there. And that takes a lot of, like we said, it takes a lot of practice. I mean, creating healthy boundaries, seeing myself worthy of having opinions. That was very, very hard. Staying small, I worked that very well. You know, if there was an opinion, I was afraid to get left out, or giving out gifts, well, then they'll really like me. It was really important to me that people liked me. And I imagine there's a lot of people like that. And I truly believe there are people who feel more. It doesn't mean they're better. It just means they feel like, so if I was a child and someone yelled at me, I would be very penetrated. And another child might be like, they would feel something, but their own central nervous system wouldn't be as sensitive as maybe mine. And I think we like to throw in empath. Well, I'm an empath. Well, that sounds really nice, but the empath is also someone who feels a lot more. It doesn't mean that an empath is here and everybody else is down here. It's like, what do you do with that? You know, like if you feel more and you pick up on things, it could be harder. So if someone rejects you and you're a sensitive person, I always saw it as sensitive as a negative thing. Oh, I think I heard that most of my life. You're so sensitive, Donna. And I'm like, yeah. And then, you know, on the path, I started to read and listen, and that, you know, being sensitive is an opportunity to go deeper within yourself. Not someone who's not sensitive can't, but so when you really feel inflicted by what's around you, you could still use that gift or opportunity to go deeper within and see where the triggers are coming from. I just feel like I get triggered faster. And I often, and someone would say, oh, you're sensitive, but I think it's more that I just feel more. It's hard to describe. You know, I'll be in the same room with someone else and they'll be like, I didn't notice anything. And I'm like, how is that possible?
I can relate to that. And I would say I'm almost identical. And then they would say, well, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. Well, not to you, but, and so I'm like, I wish there were times I didn't care as much, meaning have so much passion or take on those feelings from others as I do, because something smaller, mundane as somebody else actually affects me more because I am, as you call it, sensitive to something that person may not be meant to be acting that way, but I took it because I'm reading more into it internally, that it affects me a lot more than maybe somebody that doesn't have that same empathetic personality that we do. And that's just a fact. So you got to check yourself on it. And what I ask myself, is that really a real issue that I'm having or that person's having, or should I give this much attention, honestly, you know? And what I usually find if I take a step back is sometimes my feelings are valid and warranted. Other times, not so much. I might tend to overact or overanalyze, as Linda and I both do. So it's a balancing act at all times, right?
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. And it is hard sometimes because, again, like even I would consider a gift for us is portrayed as a negative. Right. So what do you even do with that? You know, okay, I didn't win the gold medal, but I am overly sensitive.
Yeah.
Which is considered a weakness in a lot of people's mind, you know, just get tougher. And I think it's really hard to pull away from the character that people create for you instead of knowing how to bring up people who feel more. Or, and again, I don't want to leave out people who say, well, I'm not like that. You know, I just feel like trauma comes to all of us. None of us are without it. But instead of seeing the trauma as such a negative, I'm not saying that everyone should like their trauma or be okay with it, but see it as, I listen to Bashar a lot about, you know, the opportunity to, with the triggers from our trauma, and then know we can elevate from it and then move to the next level with it. And then that's how I feel you heal from it. Because if not, then it becomes a big Band-Aid. Like, oh, my mother was awful, so am I. You know, you're like,
yeah.
Whatever.
cycle continues, like we
Yeah.
said
Yeah,
earlier.
Yeah. So I
really.
don't think there's this big aha moment. At least I don't think so for me. I think it's, and I think breaking the trauma, I don't think there's smoke. I don't think there's any physical gesture that you could do. I think it all starts in here. And I think if you truly want to have a more healed life, I think you should go within and get the answers within you. Not to say that speaking to professionals, I have a spiritual mentors, I had what happened to me as a child. I had a traditional therapist. I think if you have that opportunity to do that, I think it's well worth to
Mhm.
observe yourself through other people to help you, to get you there.
Well, because sometimes, things that we do and people that come into our lives are considered mirrors. You
Mm-hmm.
know, their behavior that triggers us is actually for our own growth.
Right.
They're reflecting a mirror. And, that took a long time for me to process that and oh, really? Okay. So,
Mm-hmm.
because when you're raised in an environment where there's a lot of anger, a lot of arguing, a lot of whatever, I mean, I used to just fly,
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what to do with it, didn't know how to process it. So, it's something you learn every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a conscious choice. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
I agree.
do
I agree.
you want to stay like you are, or do you want to continue to grow and evolve? And I know that was a question I had to ask myself, what am I willing to do?
Mm-hmm.
And is it easy?
Mm-hmm.
No. And I know, just like my question to you is, after all that, and then you go to medical school and you graduated with honors and all of that, how
Mm-hmm.
did you feel? How
I
did
felt,
you
I think,
handle
good
it?
for me. That was about it. I just
Yeah.
felt like, oh, well, I think it for me, I had as a nurse practitioner, I received a 3.5, and the two women who I studied with, they got a 4.0, and oh yeah, that sounds about right, because I did well for me. And even though my mom cried through the whole thing, she was so proud. I remember when I wanted to become a nurse, she was so protective over me. I was married at this point, and my husband and I, he's like, you're really good with people, but I don't think sales is your bag, because you're not very good at lying. So I think you're better off maybe helping people, because that seems to be more what is good.
Yeah.
You'll flourish. So I went into all these medical programs, and becoming a nurse became an idea. And then I did some volunteering, and I went into St. Vincent's Nursing School in Manhattan, and it was a 2-year program. It was hard, and met a lot of wonderful people. It's like one of those things, you did it, would you do it again? Probably, but I would hesitate for a moment.
Yeah.
Those nuns are not easy. I'm Catholic, but I didn't go to Catholic school, but it was a great education. But at the end of the day, I think you really, no matter how much you accomplish, I had that in my notes. If you really don't believe you are enough, no matter what you do, it will not heal that. So I think what drives a lot of people is not what they want, but from their pain.
Mhm.
So I will be this, I will become that. And like I said, back to my mom, I didn't finish that thought. She said to my husband, I don't think she can do that program. I think it's going to be too hard for her. And my husband looked at her and said, yes, she can. She'll be fine.
Mhm.
So of course she was very proud. And it wasn't that she was trying to knock me down. It's just that she was really afraid that if I failed, then how would I seem? I knew how her brain worked, but she also thought that way about herself, and my grandmother did, and my great grandmother did. So again, it's a belief system that is very, very strong, and it is very hard to break. And I gave opportunity to keep that storyline, right? Because I had ADHD, I had processing issues. So oh, here we go. This is what, and I was the first daughter, this is as good as it gets in our house, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Playing it safe. They wanted to play it safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Because you want to be safe. So I think a lot, that's a good word. I think everything we do is based on keeping our ego or emotions safe. So if you make yourself small, if that works for you, then you're safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you give a lot of gifts and everyone's kind to you, that I was saying to Linda, even when I got breast cancer 8 years ago, I was lucky. It was only stage 1, but I noticed, because I've been on the path, how much I was feeling the support and love from others, and how much my pain was very happy receiving all, like, more than it should have been, if that makes any sense. Like, there was a lack. So hearing how much everyone loved me was almost putting a band-aid on a huge wound. Of course, I didn't want breast cancer, but being that it was presented, and I wasn't really surprised about the breast cancer, I'll be honest with you, this might be my spiritual side. I had so much sadness since childhood, cried so much, I could feel it in my chest.
Mm.
And I remember being a young woman thinking, one day I'll probably have breast cancer. So it
Mm.
was very weird when they told me I had and I had it on the left side. So if anyone's spiritual, you know what that means. So I think for me, it was like, so I do believe what we were saying earlier, what you think and how you talk about yourself, it goes into ourselves.
No
If,
doubt.
I'm not saying I'm blaming anyone who gets cancer, God forbid, or child, I'm only speaking about my own journey, and I could feel all that internalized sadness going into my body. So when I was told I had it, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't really shocked. And funny enough, I also wasn't really, of course, I was upset, but I wasn't devastated. I was sort of like, okay, I'm lucky it's stage 1. I'm lucky to have health care. I'll get a lumpectomy. We flew to MD Anderson. They were an amazing facility. I live in New York, so they did the lumpectomy there. I did the radiation at home, and I just moved on from it. But yet, if I hurt my friend's feelings, I'd be up all night for days.
Yeah.
That's not normal. Cancer should be what keeps you up for days, but I was like, oh yeah, this is part of the course. I'm lucky at stage 1.
Yeah, the
Move
two
on.
shall pass.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And even during COVID, I was sort of
It's
like,
expected, in this
I,
environment.
hard to shake my boots with most things, but if I hurt your
I'm the same
feelings,
way.
my whole world is over. Yeah,
Yeah, if somebody
that's
mad at
trauma.
you. Yeah,
Oh my
sure
God,
is. Unbelievable.
I know.
Wow.
The brain's strong.
Big time. We talked about that on our last Illumination series too, Lynn, a little bit about what we think and manifest come to fruition, both positive and negative. So this is a good dovetail for what we previously discussed, actually. It's all kind of coming together.
Yeah.
Well, if you had, so look, I'm thinking about, you go from childhood sexual abuse, you had your bullying as you moved into middle school, it created all of this negativity, but at the same time, you developed these tools, that you were using to get through them that weren't necessarily healthy, but they worked for you, right? Then you get married, you have breast cancer, so you're facing that. You went to medical school, you did all these amazing things and started your business. What what would you say is that pivotal point when you really started feeling like I've had a lot of this darkness I'm carrying, right? I'm doing all these different things, because I know you've been on a spiritual path for a very long time. When did you really start to sense or feel like light was coming in?
I think, well, this last 3 years have been hard because I think I was really trying to search out who I truly am and how to stand on my 2 feet. I think I've always had challenges with friendships with women, and trust, based on a lot of my history. And it's what I figured out. It's not the women that were in my life it's how I took people in and gave my power away, you know, and no one's asking for that. I was doing that. So I was someone if you thought I was someone. And if you even slightly look like you were taking that away, then my whole ego just collapsed. So keeping myself safe was by constantly keeping others happy so they saw me as someone. So I think I would say within this year, when the dust was starting to settle, I started to see the light where I started to see myself still, you know. So it's almost like I'm getting to know who I am,
Mhm.
right? Because I mean, it was so bad at one point that I had OCD tendencies. Like I would do things to control, wear the same jewelry. If I had a really bad day, wouldn't wear that outfit again. And according to my traditional therapist, she said, "Well, that's you trying to have some level of control when you don't feel like you have any." You know. Um, so all the check marks or trauma hit off for me, but I think when I finally started to choose me, I think as scary as it was, because I think for anyone who had a similar life as mine or could relate to it, just so worried about what's on the other side of it. You
Mhm.
know, well, my fear is on the other side of it, I am going to be alone. Even though I'm married and I have two kids and I have an extended family that loves me and I love them and I'm good friends, it's just that starting to become truly me, you start to think, will people still like me? Because me with any type of boundary is different than the person they knew before. And so to me, I felt at the end, just recently, I feel within this year, that if they're still standing after I have shifted, then they're meant to be in my life presently. And if the person is not in my life because I changed, they were there for a purpose.
Mhm.
You know, everyone has a purpose in your life. No one is evil, no one is bad. You know, they're there to either show you who you are or stand where you are. But everyone has a purpose. So I give blessings to anyone who showed me who I truly am, and anyone who's still with me, or anyone in the past that helped me become who I am today. There are no regrets.
Very nice. And I'm going to go back and grab on to personal power.
Mm,
That when we don't live in our own authenticity, you know, who we want to become or who we are supposed to become, right? And that personal power, I find that we give it away so much just to survive
mhm,
when we're really supposed to be caressing that personal power
mhm.
and owning it,
Protecting
use,
it.
protecting it, and then being wise about how we use it.
Mm.
Do you
Yeah,
know what
be
I'm
very
saying?
careful who you spend a lot of time with. I mean, at the end of the
Absolutely.
day, you know, if you're in a relationship that has given you lessons and you still feel like it's toxic, then stand in your own 2 feet, like I said. And if they're still standing after, then again, they're meant to be with you. But if they're not, then they were there to teach you, and that is it. I think if you start to blame everybody, like, well, she or he or they, then you're living in the past. That's another thing. I think it's very hard for us to not always reflect on the past, even our childhood memories. Remember, you're looking at those memories. I didn't say they didn't happen, but you're looking through them through a child's eyes. So fragile. And then from there, you move on and you take that memory with you. And, I do believe if you heal yourself now, not that you change the past, but you get to be a new version of what you learned and what you went through.
And look at it through a new lens,
as an adult lens.
as an
Become
adult
the
lens
parent
and
of
an
your
evolved
child.
lens.
I never really understood that. I'm not, I'm always very awkward if someone's like, look in the mirror and look at your inner child. I feel like the kind of person that laughs at myself because I find it, I don't know, uncomfortable. I guess that's the whole thing. I was like, oh my God, how's this going to work? But I think if you meditate or even take a moment, I one time thought of myself, I envisioned myself as a child, a fragile child of age. I would say between 4 and 7. Probably that's big for me at that age for obvious reasons. And saw myself as this perfect, innocent child, and that did nothing wrong, that had things happen.
Yeah.
And I think you're still that child. You're just in an older avatar, but but you're still that child. I mean, I think we have to be really good to ourselves and give pause, and even if you have a bad day, like I really tried to work on this and I feel like I'm failing over and over again, that's okay. You at least taking the time to take care of that inner child. You're your best advocate. Everyone's in their head. I mean, a lot of times I know it's easy to say when someone is not kind to you, you're watching their trauma play out, and they might be unconscious about it. So I sometimes do when someone's really cruel, I'll try to envision them as a child
Hmm.
and them being innocent
That's good.
and them being in pain. I get verklempt. But I think that's but I think that happens a lot. I think we all are innocent and we cannot control how our experiences are, but we can take pause and try to heal from them, understand them, and then grow from them
I
and take
agree.
ownership.
Well said. You know, there's a saying that people come into our space or our lives for a reason or a season,
Mm-hmm.
which is exactly, what you were talking about. That, and when those people are gone, they serve their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many things that you shared with the audience today are things that people can relate to, that any aspect of it. And I think, one of the things that I think is important that we really want the audience to know that, you're not alone. There are aspects of all of our lives that you could relate to in some way or some form.
Mm-hmm.
But as Lenny and I had talked on the movement versus stagnation, the illumination the other day, it's just key to move forward, you
Yeah.
know, honestly, and try to find where you need to evolve and where the authenticity can finally start to show itself, because
Mm-hmm.
we hide ourselves so much when we're hurting.
Oh, 100%. I usually have a little like quiz for myself if I know I'm in the right space or not. So I don't know if you ever experienced this. So you're out in the day, you're at the supermarket, and then people are just smiling at you. And people ask you questions like, do you know where blah, blah, blah is? And then that's when I know I'm lighter.
Mhm.
And when I'm shrouded, let's just say I'm suffering, you could feel people are kind of a little guarded around you, right? Because you're spinning. And I think the only thing when you're on the path that we all still spin, I always thought of Eckhart Tolle as being perfect, and I think I read something his wife says, he'll complain about taking out the garbage, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's right, he's human. Like all these people, Daryl Anka, Lee Harris, they're humans who have human experience as well, and not to put everybody else on a pedestal, but take pause within yourself that there is no failure to this. I think, like you said, you dust yourself off and you're like, that's that trigger again, and usually what I do is like, if I'll watch Seinfeld before I go to sleep. I like to think I was meditating for an hour and then go into a space, but honestly, I like to laugh before I go to bed,
Whatever it takes.
Whatever. So I think whatever keeps you lighter, I think that's the best way to do it. If you could do either through work or like Bashar talks about this a lot, like if you like sweeping more than vacuuming, then do the sweeping. Like whatever keeps you in that version of you that keeps you lighter in that moment, then do that. Keeping that frequency light as much as you can. And another thing, if you're not in a great frequency and you feel really dense and dark, analyze it, understand it, and then say, this is part of my human experience. Instead of seeing like, oh, I had such a horrible day, which we all do. But then take a step back and pause and be like, what was my human experience? Because when we cross over, right, we're all one of energy. This is how I believe. And there is no suffering. So if you don't have suffering, where's the growth? So we signed up for this.
Yeah, where's the duality?
That's right.
And it's tough down here.
Because you can't have one without the other,
You cannot have one without the
and
other.
and everything in this world is a vibration. And if you even quantum physics, that desk over there is not really a desk, it's just vibratory. It's the way our eyes and lens look at everything right now. We put it in a static form.
No, I'm a big Matrix fan, so yeah.
Yeah.
I believe we're all Neos trying to figure it out. And some of us are in the game and some of us pulled ourselves out.
Yeah.
But remind yourself you're in the game. There's an opportunity to grow, and like, if someone said, well, why would you put yourself in such a suffering situation? And, my dad always remembered his past life. And he said, because here there's time. When you cross over, there is no time. And here it's a snap. And who you truly are, this character we're playing right now, you wake up when you cross over.
Yeah.
And then you'll be like, look at that. I was playing Donna Bruno.
And there's a review, so you've got to look at it all again and like, oh no, was it really me?
And my father, he says that you're supported when you have that life review. Like, being a Catholic, there's a lot of like, it's going to be punishment and yada yada. And he's always remembered his past life. That's maybe another podcast. I'll throw my dad on here, but he's always remembered.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. His experience. He's always his baby's past life, and I don't know if you guys know what an oversoul is, but he believes he met his oversoul or God, and what appeared was a really electrical, like looked like fireworks. But that was his experience too. I also believe whatever makes you most comfortable, I think will probably appear. Whatever your belief system is. I believe in physics and energy and math, so I think a lot of it is connected with the spirituality.
Well, Lenny, I had jumped in and asked her a couple of questions, and I know that you had questions, so I want to make sure that your questions you got to ask.
I think my first question just kicked it all off, and Donna made so many great points that I'm actually a little bit blown away how many were relatable as well to both you and I. And you just kind of summarized it, Donna, in this podcast, and like for the eliminations that we have done. But it's not kind of a great path that I'm trying to get on, as well as Linda, and it's working every day. But to your point, we have to do the work within. Number one, I believe that. And my other point was, don't be afraid to be the one to break that cycle. Is it going to be easy? Not at all. But we're not here for it to be easy. It's a struggle here, but we have to learn from it, so you don't do it again the next time around. That's what I believe as well. So I don't really have any other questions besides that. There's just so many great points that I'm looking forward to kind of analyzing this one actually. But Don, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
You as well. You as well.
Thank you so much.
And I think the other thing to remind people is that, surround yourself with people who have the same type of energy,
Yep. And then the people who aren't,
I'm getting so much better.
Be an example, and when you have again, I think my last thought to all this is like, don't be so hard on yourself. There's no there is no golden opportunity. Like, again, like if I do this, if I break that, then I finally made it, and then there's going to be a bliss. I don't think it works that way. I think is the gift is that something happened in your life, is loss of job, loss of someone, if it's divorce, if it's whatever. Sometimes those situations, sometimes it's just an awakening within yourself. And the awakening isn't that you become something that's going to be in total bliss. You have the opportunity to shift you and everyone around you. And then when there is, and life is completely like this. The only thing I think what we try to do, instead of being like this, try to do, when you do this, try to do more of this. And then reflect. I mean, I sometimes reflect on my life and be like, oh, I remember being so upset about that. I'm not as upset about that anymore. I didn't say I wasn't upset anymore. I'm not as upset. You
about
see?
because your perspective shifts
You
and your
start to
thinking
shift.
shifts and you've evolved, so that's kind
Right.
of what just little baby steps. Doesn't have to
That's
be
all you
anything
need.
major. And
Yeah.
just look
None
at
of
things
us
from a
have to.
new perspective. And that's where, I do a lot of tarot and I love it. But I love the hangman because he's upside down, he's
Mm-hmm.
at peace, and he's looking at it from everything from a new perspective. And sometimes we're so caught in the midst of everything that we can't see the forest for the trees because
Mm.
all we know is what it's doing emotionally to us. So, hang yourself upside down, go in, think before
And
you
know your
speak.
guides are with you.
Yeah,
Like, remember, your guides are with you all the time.
all the time.
You are not alone. No matter what you believe in, it doesn't matter. If you want to call it energy, you want to call it angels, you want to call it guides, whatever. You are not alone. Your family is, or your earth family is with you. Your whatever you want to call it, galactic, or you want to call it, angels, whatever. They're there to support you, but you can't ask for help. So when you're going into that interview for a job, you can say, please be with me. Be with me when I don't want to be alone when I walk in that room. Because, by the way, you were never alone before you walked into that room, but you want to feel their presence around you. You want to see yourself, because I promise you this, I will be shocked if once we cross over, we are not one energy. I will be shocked if it's a bunch of tiny stories. I think we all come into this earth as individual stories so we can grow from it and then go back to where it's perfection and then elevate from there. I think it's just constant elevation. So suffering is part of that elevation.
Anything
I
else?
like that.
Anything else, Lenny, that you'd like to leave with? Oh,
Man.
our question for the group. Remember, we always leave a question for them to ponder.
What do you got, Linda? Do you have one? 2, 3, 4, maybe?
Let's see. Take a moment over this next week and just sit with yourself. Just find a quiet place, close your eyes, and just say, I'm listening. And just sit with it. And do that even for 5 minutes each day and see if someone starts to respond.
Mm.
That's good. I'm gonna flip mine to Donna because I think Donna has a good question for the audience out there.
Yeah, Donna.
Just a hunch, but I think you got something, Donna, don't you?
Oh, a question to ask the audience?
Yeah.
I think part of it, is that when you're standing your own 2 feet, you know, I want you to take pause and ask yourself, am I really not brave enough or strong enough? Or is that something someone told me that I'm not brave enough and strong enough?
Excellent.
You are perfection. You were meant to be who you are. God or source does not make mistakes. Look at yourself as I am capable. So when you have a situation coming up, if it's for your child, your spouse, for yourself, you know, and they like, how do I support them? Am I strong enough? Am I smart enough? Am I a good enough parent, a good enough spouse, or good enough for myself? You are. You're perfection. Sometimes when we're with others, you're supposed to just hold space for our loved ones. And sometimes we're there to support either emotionally or physically or monetarily, whatever the situation is that you feel what's right. But never doubt yourself that you're not enough because you already are. But you have to really dig deep. Like when you doubt yourself, ask yourself, are you doubting yourself because that's your ego talking? Or you're doubting yourself because you were told to think you're not enough? Like, because there'll be some type of ultimate something about you never tapped into because you were told a certain thing. Question that. Question yourself why you're doubting yourself about becoming who you truly are for yourself and for you who you support outside of you.
Nice.
You know, because I'm telling you that character that was created, it becomes a solidified belief system that we live by, not what is the truth. So undo that story.
Nice, nice.
And I'll just add to, I'm going to say more time. Why not be the one to break that traumatic cycle? You could be the one, you know, in that long generational line of trauma from generations past. You could be the one. You may not think that, but ask for help. As Donna says, the spirit guides are around you at all times, and they'll give you the strength to do it if you really want to do it. So that's what I'll leave with the audience. Great show, guys, ladies.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
Appreciate
you.
You so much. We
What a
appreciate it.
pleasure.
And take a look at Donna. Here's her website again. It's DB Rejuvenation NY for New York.com.
Go get some work done.
Yeah, yeah. If you feel like you need Botox and filler, you know.
Hey, at least look good out there, y'all.
That's right. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, so
Thank
funny.
you.
Have a
Thanks,
good day.
Donna.
All right,
Bye,
much
Linda.
love to both of
Thank
you.
you.
God
Much
bless.
love. Thank you.